to AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties with English degrees or those who need them to understand the tortured poets department. I'm Monsi.
I'm Jody.
I'm Jen.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift. Today, we're bringing you a very special Tortured Poets Department episode. I cannot say this album title
it's hard.
Without
TTPD.
But forgive our lack of editing. You're going to get the real deal, all the mess ups and everything included, because we're doing this kind of ad hoc and don't have our usual editing in place. We're just so excited because
we're excited. We get it to you fast. There's a lot to understand. We don't understand.
And this is the first time that we've had an actual new album drop in the time that we've been doing this podcast. So it's our first time trying this out. We're going to try a few different things and then see where the conversation takes us. So just to give you all, our dear listeners, a kind of roadmap of what we're hoping to cover today, we're going to try to give you our initial thoughts on the album, some candid reactions. Point of clarity, of course, is it's a double album, which I'm sure, I don't know, we were definitely caught off guard by that because it is ridiculous and can come up with a lot of songs and surpass every expectation. So we'll see how we go through that and want to share some reactions with you. And then we want to talk about the poem, the In Summation poem that she gave us to try to see if that can give us some context about the album as a whole. And then finally, all of us did come up with a few songs that we wanted to touch on specifically. And we'll try to cover a few lines that really stood out to us and just talk through those songs and what
trying to keep it about the lyrics, keep it about, I think this is definitely going to be an interesting one for us because there's so many rumors and like just so much speculation flying around. But I really do think that we can stick to the text here,
to the poetry,
learn to the with the poems, and I think there's a lot, especially in that In Summation post. I guess it's like a postscript because I think it was at the end of the album, or maybe it was in the beginning. I haven't gotten the physical copy.
In Summation is usually a conclusion or a summary.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the album's a conclusion. I don't know. Now we're getting into it. What did you think? Like, what was like? Whoa! So Monty, you were awake.
I was
because
awake.
You're on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So yeah. Tell us about how you experienced this. Album.
I will say that even though the first version of the album, like the first part of the album, let's say, is it 15 songs, 14 songs, a normal amount of songs, let's say. It still was taking me a very long time to get through it because I think all of us realize like it's poetry. It is very dense and some of the songs are very long. So I was just making my way through the first part of the album, which just looking online, it feels like a lot of people felt the same way. It was like, let's just get through the first listen. And I think I had maybe just gotten through that when we hit around the 2-hour mark and she dropped the entire second part of the album. And I was like very excited, but also a little tired by that point, candidly speaking. I think so people have like the different personalities of eras and you have your folklore Evermore girlies and then you have your 1989 Midnights girlies and I'm definitely the latter. And so I feel like this album was not like quite my style, but but as I started reading with the listening with the lyrics, I mean, I do think she's kind of outdone herself with some of the lyrics in this album. Was kind of my first reaction.
I guess I was the next one to listen because I woke up at 4:30 in the morning East Coast time. Not specifically to listen to the album. I was jet lagged. I got back from Europe the day before, so thank you jet lag, I guess. But it did help that I had all of that time in the morning. And so by that point, I knew I saw Monty's Slack message that this was a double album. And I was like, oh shit, I need 2 hours and 2 minutes to listen. And so I went on the couch and like listened and it was dense.
It's very
like
dense.
The first listen, it is a dense album and it is a lyrics first album. And I love lyrics first. So I'm Evermore in 1989. So I like both ends of the spectrum. I like the quill and the glitter pen songs. But unlike even Evermore, which has some breaks in it of lightness, this is heavy. It's really not until you get to, I think I Can Do It With a Broken Heart is the first, and that's track
Yes.
13, is the first time you're like,
and that was immediately,
I mean, it's deep cut. It's like really dark lyrics, but it's
that
a
was
Jack Antonoff special of like poppy music.
and that was immediately my favorite song, because I was like, there you
Yeah,
are.
I was like, that's it.
My familiar territory.
But my first listen, I'm not going to lie, I was like, oh, this is different. This is not a, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't like, this is incredible. And it took until my second listen, and even with like looking at the lyrics themselves, to be like, oh my God, this is incredible. But it's a lot.
It's very
and I think the like being overwhelmed by it impacts the feeling of the album. And if we're overwhelmed by like listening to it, I can't imagine the overwhelming emotions that went into writing it and actually like putting it down on paper and on vinyl. And Jen, you were next.
Yeah, this has been an interesting one, because I was certainly excited, but knowing that we have this podcast and that we were going to record, it felt like work in some ways. Like I was very mentally prepared to like, I need to listen to this music. I need to go through the songs. I literally created a spreadsheet for this. It's fine. It was an interesting experience of like,
this podcast has ruined Taylor
when
Swift
they
for
say
you. So
do what you love and you never work a day. Is that really supposed to be like, what you love will just become work? Like, should that be revised?
This is why I try not to make my passions my job, but this is a passion. But this is not, hey, we're not getting paid for this. It's so true. It's not really our jobs.
I woke up very tired the next morning, and
oh, you listened to
no,
midnight?
I just didn't sleep well the night before for no reason.
Okay, got it.
Well, I know why.
It's Taylor Swift anticipation.
Chris was going out of town, and he was trying to adjust. He's going to like West Coast time, and so he stayed up late, and he was trying to sleep in, and so that ruined my sleep schedule. That's why. But so I'm very tired. I wake up. Well, hey. Chris is groggy at waking up because I woke him up as I got up, and I just like pull up my phone, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's a double album. And Chris was like, is that exciting? I was like, it's just doubled my work. I have so many songs to listen to.
But work aside, that does seem to be the unanimous reaction across the board. Yeah. Is like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Thank you, but oh my God. Yeah. Give me some more time.
I think everyone was expecting a 2 a.m. something, I think. With the
we
2
got
o'clock.
a Norton anthology of poetry album. Like, this is kind of what the album feels like. It's like, oh my God, I have to carry that around.
Once I started listening,
I was expecting...
it feels very literary to me. I can give you my reasons. I can totally see the literary connections. I hope that Taylor is happy, but other than that, I really don't care about her personal life. So I was in no way was thinking about who it's about or any of that stuff, which we don't even discuss on the podcast, but like I even in my own time don't really think about it. But it very much came across to me as someone who went through something very intense, who was trying to make sense of it. And the reason why literature is so important and so impactful is, yes, tropes and these like narrative structures are very recognizable. And that's actually really comforting to us as people to see a trope that you recognize. You're like, oh, my brain can make sense of this. And there were so many things in this album that were these literary tropes of like, felt like someone trying to be like, okay, am I this character? Am I this kind of character? Is this the story I'm in? And all of the songs broke down at the end of being like, nope, it's not that one, moving on. And then we end with a manuscript that's like, I don't really know what this was, but I still wrote down the story and it's not mine anymore. Enjoy it. The conclusion is I don't know what the story is, but it's mine that I had, but it's not mine anymore. I totally saw the tortured poets literary aesthetic made sense to me in this album because I could see those patterns throughout the lyrics.
I wrote a note to myself at 7 a.m. yesterday morning so I could like remember the feelings. And I wrote, this is an album of stories and references and poetry. Duh, it's in the title. You can't listen without the lyrics. You not only need the lyrics, you need to read between the lines. I noticed a comma in the middle of a phrase. It changed the meaning. Did you intend this? Comes to mind because Hamilton, I think in Hamilton lyrics and Taylor Swift lyrics, that like words change meaning within a line, turns of phrases turn into something new and different and unexpected. It is heavy and dark and deep and loaded with meaning. And Swifties will say it's about an X, but whether it is or it isn't, it's deeper than that. And it is deeper than anything. And this album cannot be understood on the surface. It requires a dictionary and an anthology of poetry. And to really appreciate it, probably an English degree.
I
So that was my and that was after my first listen.
I do love that. We've already kind of drawn the parallels between this album and the Evermore and Folklore albums, but I love what you said earlier about like those albums still had some moments of reprieve. And I think the main difference to me was those albums still had some very musical elements. Like, yeah, it was about the lyrics, but it was equally about the music. Like, you have these, like, for example, when Willow was the first single that she dropped there, like, it had this, like, beautiful strumming guitar and, like, there's, like, piano. And, like, there was still, like, a lot of musical elements that, like, as much as it was about the lyrics, it was also about the way that the lyrics flowed to the music. In my first listen of this album, I don't even really remember what the music was initially. It was very much about the words. It was like dominated by the lyrics. And in my initial listen, music was kind of in the background. I will say in subsequent listens, in the second and third listens, now I'm starting to feel some of the music piece, and it's definitely still there, but it's just very lyric forward, like very much about the words.
I agree with that. And there's a lot of words that, so what I usually do with a Taylor album is I go straight to the YouTube lyrics videos because I want to really make sure I'm hearing things correctly. But those lyric videos weren't posted.
Yeah, they weren't there.
8:00 last night. So I saw a statistic that like she had the most like 10 million Genius lyric like lookups, like the most ever. And I'm like, yeah, that's because she didn't drop the lyric videos until later. And this, which is I'm sure it was more like an operations and logistics thing versus like because it wasn't an intentional.
I do think it was
choice.
Odd because you
need the lyrics,
but YouTube did have the channel up and it did have the songs.
It had the songs, but not the lyrics. And so I wonder if they just weren't all ready and they needed to wait. I don't know.
Or preventing leaks. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Or like if they wanted to drive people to
Spotify,
Lyric
that's
Genius.
fair.
I mean, yeah, like it could have been a part of the just deal of like where we're driving people. But it was like a choice that somebody uploaded all those videos without the lyric videos, and then those were released later.
I will say,
because once you got the lyric videos, you got some like good hints to what some of these songs are actually about.
I think with this album in particular, they are very intense emotions. All of these songs are. And I actually think there's a lot of value in kind of taking them in without immediately analyzing them. It kind of forces you to listen more with your heart than with your brain and trying to make sense of everything. And I think I really think the ongoing narrative of this album is someone who's trying their hardest to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense. And I think it's easy.
Yeah.
The words are great. The lyrics are great. I think they deserve their time. But starting with intellectualizing them, I think does kind of do a disservice to the album because it is so emotionally based. But
yeah,
I mean, when you first, like the first thing you do, if you pull up, I'm saying like
the first listen,
giving it a moment to be like, okay, like there's just a lot going on and I'm feeling all of those things is valuable, and then move on and,
I do. So the first two songs I actually didn't listen to with the lyrics. I just tried to listen to it and then I pulled up the lyrics because I was like, these are just really dense songs. And what I said about
first two, so Fortnite and Tortured Poets Department.
Yeah. And I think like what my earlier statement was about this being a more lyrics forward album and like less about the music, I really do feel like in just trying to listen to those songs without the lyrics, I was getting a little bit lost in like it sounded like one long song, or like I wasn't able to like appreciate it as much, whereas the second I pulled up the lyrics, I like understood the level of emotion. Like then I was like, oh my god, like this is devastating, or that's genius, or this is so beautifully written. Like I just feel like I couldn't do that when I was just listening to it without the lyrics. And that might just be like how I learn. Maybe I'm less auditory and more of a visual
I think that you're bringing up a really good point, which is that like we each relate or experience these songs in a different way and on a different level. And when I have conversations with people who listen to this podcast and they're like, I don't listen to music that way. It's really interesting. And so I'm learning that everyone listens to music in a different way. I'm a little bit like you, Monty, in this album where the first listen without looking at the lyrics, I'm sure there's a lot that I missed that made it harder to like grasp some of the like entire concept of some of these songs. Like for example, it took me until the end of Peter to realize this was about Peter Pan. Like it didn't, because there's a lot going on and I need to see it. That's why I print out lyrics and underline them, because that's how I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. So the first listen, I'll pick up on words and phrases that I like and that stand out, but it's harder for me to grasp the full story without like reading it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm wrong then. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding.
Wrong. No, you're not wrong. You just listen differently.
No, one of the reasons
you're different.
You just like conflict, and so you wanted to create some
one of the
conflict
reasons
by
I
saying
intentionally did
wrong.
not get my PhD is I felt like over intellectualizing art takes away from simply enjoying it, and so I tend to push back on I want to analyze, I want to understand, but I think we need to make space in the world for simply just taking in art, and we don't. It's the aesthetic theory. Not everything has to be understood the first time. I enjoyed listening to all 31 songs, and yeah, it did kind of all run together, but it means the parts that stuck out really stuck out to me, because if they made it through that
Really
noise, then I knew that was something I wanted to really sit on more. And if I had started with the lyrics, I don't think I would have caught those things that would just organically really connect with me. So it is all very different, but that it is very specifically why I didn't get a PhD. If we intellectualize too much, we stop enjoying. So I try to find that balance.
But you are getting a PhD in Taylor Swift. That's what this podcast is.
Slash, there's time yet for you to get your PhD.
Yeah, there's always time for a PhD.
So do you want to talk about
the poem?
Let's jump into the poem, because so like in addition to the music this time, I feel like with every album release, she does try to like change it up a little. With Midnights, it felt like there were these like games leading up to the release where she was dropping hints, and it was all very fun, and there was music videos and colors.
And she explained in Midnights that like this is an anthology of 13 sleepless nights. So like that was the context.
This time,
and we knew that when she announced that what Midnights was. This time, go ahead.
This time we get poems, which kind of makes sense given the title of the album, but it's like she is really leaning into this theme. And so here we have this In Summation poem.
And this is, for context, it's in the album itself. And the preview that we got when she announced it, we just got what now turns out to be the end of this poem. So we did a bonus episode around the announcement where we analyzed the poem that starts with "And so I enter into evidence," and now it turns out that is actually the last stanza of this full poem. Should we read
We can.
this?
I will say, if anyone listened to that last bonus episode, we will not go as deep in this poem as we did in those like 4 lines, because otherwise we'll be here for 10 hours.
But I could, and maybe this will be the extra credit, as I'll share this.
Just post that.
I'll share this on social and Substack. I did do it. Yeah.
I think one thing that's really interesting to me about this poem was that she did start it off with "at this hearing."
Yes.
And we had talked about the fact that it kind of like felt like somebody was on trial. We're entering in evidence. That theme definitely like continues throughout this poem as well.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of validation of that.
And it's "at this hearing, I stand before my fellow members of the Tortured Poets Department." So she's really speaking to fans. We are colleagues, peers. So she's directly addressing us as peers.
And I think like she also talked about how this story belongs to all of you now. I think that was like something that she put in her Instagram captions, and I think it kind of feels like she has mentioned this phenomenon in the past where with like All Too Well, she's like, it's a song I wrote for myself, but then it became a song for everybody else, and then I put it into this world and now it's yours. And it feels like with this album, she started there. She was just like, that's my goal. It's me putting down a bunch of feelings because I'm just giving them to the world, and then I'm going to be done with them. I thought that was really interesting because going in, and we don't talk about this, we don't talk about like the relationship speculations on this podcast, but I do think as a goal, she knew there would be a lot of speculation about like, who is this about? What is this song about from the start? Because she was coming off of this big breakup. And I think it's really clever as just a strategy of just writing something to just start off with that intention from the beginning and just say like, just so you know, this is based off of my emotions, but that's not the point. The point is I'm giving it to you now, and it's about to become something that belongs to all of us collectively. It feels like she just came into it with that mindset to kind of, I don't know, admit that up front.
Yeah, it's definitely in the manuscript that seems like the big takeaway. I mean, we talk about death of the author all the time on the podcast, but that's essentially what it is. That once something is published and into the world, it has a second life, and we can spend hours agonizing over what was going on in her brain when she wrote it. But even at the end of the day, she probably doesn't totally know all of it. Like, creating art is a complicated thing to do. But she talks about like it was a mutual manic phase. She talks about the pendulum swinging. It to me really feels like she's saying like, hey, things got really intense, and I kind of picked moments and really went in deep and wrote songs about my emotions. Enjoy, like, bon appetit. I don't know what to tell you. Like, good luck.
Yeah. It's very clear from this poem. You know, she said, these are my findings. It's a debrief, rewinding for the purpose of warning and reminding, right? She's like, I'm trying to make sense of what happened. She kind of gives you, there's like, I don't know, a bunch of stanzas, but I kind of grouped them into, there was this relationship. We know there was a relationship, you know, because she says lovers spend years denying what's ill-fated, and she goes into like this ill-fated relationship. And then she says, and in one conversation I tore down the whole sky. So then she is taking ownership of kind of ending it or making it, moving it forward, moving it down, whatever. Then you have this hallowed person came, something old, someone hallowed, who told me he could be brand new, came into the picture. It was a tidal wave. He was how gallant to save the empress. But, you know, then he says, swinging a sword, but that he could barely lift. But loneliness struck at a on that fate. I can't read her handwriting. Taylor, I cannot read your handwriting.
Loneliness struck at that fateful hour.
At that fateful hour, yeah. He never, yeah. So like that didn't work out either. He failed basically. And then she goes, in summation, it was not a love affair. It was a mutual manic phase. It was self-harm. It was a house and then cardiac arrest. So basically she is saying like there was all this shit that happened and it was manic. And here you go. So I enter this all into evidence and now it's yours.
I think it's funny that in this she's talking about the worst men too. Like she says it's the worst men that I write best. But there are some happy songs on this album too, and that's not mentioned in this poem.
But it's the worst men
that she writes
that I write best is also a reference to Dylan Thomas. And do not go gently into that good night. And she references Dylan Thomas in track 2, the Tortured Poets Department. So the reason, so I was the one that insisted, I was like, guys, we can't do this episode without analyzing this poem. And I would go into it because this poem gives context to the album as a whole
and the theme.
And she starts to reference some of the songs. So she says the Tortured Poets Department. She talks about leads the caged beast to do the most curious things. She talks about being caged in But Daddy, I Love Him. She has when she talks about the relationship, one of the relationships, she talks about galaxies, planets, and stars. Down Bad is a metaphor about being abducted by aliens, and you have that planet, stars, galaxy imagery in that song. she says, out of the slammer and into the tidal wave, we have a song, fresh out the slammer. And then she references, but it's the worst men that I write best. And that is a reference to Dylan Thomas. And she directly name drops Dylan Thomas in the Tortured Poets Department song. So like,
And
this is.
And do not go gently into that good night also is the poem that they talk about in Dead Poets Society, if I recall, right?
Ooh, is it?
I think
gotta
so.
go.
It's been a long time.
I'm pretty sure it is because I'll fact check this, but I'm pretty sure it is because I think that's where I heard this poem for the first time. I don't recall it from school, so that's why. And I just think that's interesting because even in the Fortnite music video, we got a Dead Poet Society reference, and we talked about Dead Poet Society just in the naming of the album too. So there's some connections there.
I will say, as credit to this album,
that is correct. It was in the Dead Poet Society.
I will say, just as a credit to this album too, I did not know this poem existed until Jody said we should talk about it. And while it's a good poem and I think it's good for setting the context, everything that we just discussed I got from the album itself. I did not need the poem.
That's fair.
Which it's totally
Correct.
worth. It's interesting. I'm glad she did it. It was totally worth discussing. But I'm just saying, like, I think it's a credit to the cohesiveness of the album that all of this message, like, this is the thesis statement. If you want to make the metaphor of a paper, if this is the thesis statement,
the abstract,
then the rest of the work goes back to it well. And a really good abstract or a good thesis statement, if you took it out, it should still be clear what's happening. It's good to have. It makes it easier to understand, but it's still consistent enough that the messages are there woven throughout the whole album, which I just think is good. Like, it's just good writing. Yeah.
It's chef's kiss.
Yeah.
It's perfection.
A good summary. I hate it when people say in summation and then just come up with a brand new conclusion that like was nowhere else in the work. So good job, Tay.
But I also think it does, we've seen visually in this album, there's been a lot of back and forth. Is it academic? Is it a psych ward? Like, what is it? And I kind of see both in this summation, right? So it is academic. There's a hearing where fellow members of a department, but then she talks specifically about a manic phase, and a little bit about insanity, right? Struck with a case of restricted humanity, temporary insanity, like, so I think it's a little bit of both, and we also see that very clearly in the Fortnite music video visuals as well. It's still this mix of both, like, academic and insanity, and
and Dead Poet Society,
and Dead Poet. But like, Jen, you're the. I mean, you made a really good point. You're like that. Yeah, it's kind of what an English department.
Yeah, it is. It was. Yeah, like I said, throw some. If you told me there were mold in those walls, I'd be like, hey, I've been there. It's better funded than most English departments I've been a part of. I think it's very much leaning into this tortured artist. I mean, obviously tortured poets, but the overall tortured artist is very much a big trope, and it's really leaning into that. And it's kind of creating this meshing, it feels like, of saying, like, if you got an academic department of poets together, it would be like an insane asylum, is like what I feel like the kind of message is. Of, like, if you put all these artists in this room to say, let's do a bunch of stuff, that things would get manic, chaos. There's cardiac arrest happening, tick, tick, tick of love bombs, like all of these very violent images that are very emotional. I feel like that it's essentially saying, not even just saying like, oh, there's an asylum and it's saying, if this happens, if we, all these tortured poets get together, it will functionally be like an insane asylum, which is also not the words we would really use today for a genuine place, but artistically, that's what's kind of happening.
We're leaning into our tortured poets.
Well, I mean, aesthetically in the video, she's very much in the Victorian era. So, spoilers, if you're a new listener, go back and listen to our Mad Woman episode, because we get into literally asylums and insanity and women in that era. So, very relevant to what she's doing here.
I found a lot of I think, we've talked about the romantic poets, which a little bit of a different type of, feeling. But in our eco-criticism episode, we talked about the romantic poets. We just did a poetic repetition episode that I think I've noticed a lot of poetic repetition in these lyrics, and I had to go back and look at our definitions. And in the poem, so go us. I'm going to pat ourselves on the back a little bit.
Feels like we kind of know what we're talking about. Yay!
I don't want to jinx us though before we start talking about these songs.
Yeah, but
is it what you expected before we dive into some of the songs, like from an overall perspective, like from that, like when we got this announcement, it's been I can't tell time, 2 months, 2.5 months. Is this what you expected?
I can go because kind of yes. I do feel like her branding has been really consistent. I think there were a few of us that were like hoping for something more like the 1989 and Midnight's albums that she just dropped recently, only because it's kind of like where her headspace has been at recently. Folklore and Evermore were so different from her style, but they were also both released during pandemic years, and so I don't know, like to me, I think I always kind of just assumed like, yeah, they were like a little different, but that was like the Quill era was like also very much in line with just like pandemic vibes. Whereas like recently where she had been coming out of Midnights and then like the 1989 re-record, it was just such a different sound and a different feel that when I think I got like the names of the songs, I was hoping for something more punchier with some of those names. But I also think that was like me being like a little delusional because like the branding has been so consistent. It was black and white. It was muted. It was a white heart. It was I mean, poetry in the name. So you kind of knew it had to be this lyrical kind of lyrical forward piece. And I think to that degree, it has been so consistent and very, very in line with the entire universe that she was trying to create with this album.
Yeah, I think I agree. Knowing too how, because we got the writers pretty early, at least on the songs we knew existed. And seeing the split of Antonoff and Dessner was kind of a like, okay, this is gonna be sort of a synthy Evermore Folklore is what I was guessing based on that, and I would say that's correct.
People have been saying it's like if Midnight's had a baby with Folklore.
For sure, and that's pretty much what we got. And
there was more anger than I was expecting. I was expecting more sad ballads, and there was still sadness, but there was more anger and like woven in with some of that than I was originally expecting, which I like. I can generally empathize more with anger than sadness, so that worked for me.
I think there was so much speculation about this being an album specifically about her relationship with Joe, and I know we don't talk about rumors and personal life, but it's not a rumor. We know that she was in this relationship. So I think there was so much speculation about who this album would be about, that because there's so much anger and the tone is different and it doesn't feel like it's about this long relationship that she's been in, I think like thematically, in terms of like the tone of the songs, it's different than I expected. But from a lyrical and storytelling perspective, it's pretty on par. And I think Monty, like, the consistency and the branding and the tone and the theme is all there. And I think it'll be interesting when we start to talk about some of these songs, specifically looking at like which ones were written with Aaron and which ones were written with Jack. You start to see the two sides, and not even written but produced. Which ones did Jack? You can tell what Jack produces, and I think, and it is just really, really, really apparent. I think in this album, the Jack and the Aaron of it all, as opposed to Midnight's, Evermore, and Folklore, where I think the albums overall felt more cohesive. This one feels like the album is cohesive, and then it has these like a few pops of like things that are different and more poppy. Whereas Midnight's was like all synthy, or like 90% synthy, and Evermore and Folklore were like 90% woodsy vibes. This one is so dark and heavy that when you have those moments, even if some of the lyrics are light, sometimes it's more like I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, where the lyrics are not light but the music is. They stand out a lot more.
I think it's interesting. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when your thesis is I had a manic episode, though, it makes it really easy to create a cohesive album because you can do whatever you want.
You can do whatever. Can we curse? Because
I mean,
we're gonna curse in these
every
whatever the
yeah.
fuck you want.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the number of f-bombs
Yes, every
made
song.
my New York heart so happy.
Every
I was
song.
like, oh.
And maybe that's some of
Leaning-
the anger that you're talking about, Jen. Like, I feel like I sense the sadness more. Maybe that's because I did it with the lyrics and not just like the listening, but I feel like I got some anger in the form of like sarcasm, like biting, sarcastic anger, but I felt less of the anger than the sadness in my like interpretation. I will say that like on the topic of thinking it would be more about the relationship, I know that was like the going in hypothesis for a lot of people. I had personally just thought it would be so lame if it was all about Joe Alwyn. Like, I know that was a long relationship, but it just doesn't seem very much Taylor's style to like make like a whole album dedicated to it. And I feel like it would have been giving him too much credit. So I am glad to see like a wider breadth of topics. I also kind of expected that, though. I didn't think that she would go all in. I also just for the fact that she said that she had been working on it for at least 2 years.
2 years.
Made me think like she's got to be doing something a little different than just that. But very, very happy to like kind of feel the breadth of.
Yeah, there's more diversity in the song,
Yeah.
what the songs are about than I think was initially anticipated, but also like all of her albums have diversity of topics. They're not all about,
especially recently. Like, I think she does these exercises where she's like pushing herself to do different things with her music. And as a listener, I'm kind of like with you, Jen, where I don't immediately try to be like, ooh, who is this about? And I feel like, especially with this, there were a lot of songs where I was like, I have no idea what this is about. It is an amazing emotion.
Matter.
Yeah, exactly.
What I felt, and so what I did was I wrote down just the quote, like the lyrics that just stuck out to me. And when I look at what those lyrics are, they didn't stick out to me because of, to your point, Jen, about who she wrote them about. It's because I'm like, oh my God, I feel this in my bones. Like, I relate to this so much. And maybe this is a good transition for us to start to talk about the songs that we picked, because like I picked I didn't pick this one, and I don't know if anyone talking about that, but All My Mornings Are Mondays Stuck in an Endless February. I was like, girl, the only way that would have been better would be if it was All My Mornings Are Mondays Stuck in an Endless January, because January just feels way longer than February. So that's my one critique, Taylor, is January is way more miserable than February. But other than that, it was a very relatable. Like, I understand just how like you feel like how long time is frozen in that moment. Anyway.
So,
do you want to start talking?
Yeah, I guess this takes us into the next part of today's episode, where we all kind of picked like 2 to 3 songs that stood out to us, and then I think the idea was like, let's talk about some lines that like really stood up. I did kind of look at these songs a little bit more thematically, and then I'll have like a few lines that we can pick on. But the songs that I will be covering today is LOML,
10 milliliters,
which was written by Taylor. Yeah, 10 milliliters.
Back to our bonus episode for that one,
which was written by Taylor and Aaron. And I think for me,
what track is that?
This is track 12.
Okay.
And to me, I wrote down Enchanted because, well,
Ooh,
first of all, going into this, we had a hypothesis that the name was Love of My Life. And I think everyone would have agreed that's what we thought LOML meant. I think after you listen to the song, you'll realize that actually the LOML is referring to Loss of My Life.
So sad.
Which is really freaking depressing. I mean, this was one of the songs where I was literally like, this is the saddest song I have ever heard in my life. And for a song that's like Loss of My Life, like that kind of tracks. The reason that I wrote Enchanted is I was on the lookout to see if there were some songs. I mean, we're talking about poems and poetry. And so I was looking for this habit that she has of taking ordinary, turning it into extraordinary, which we on this podcast have started referring to as like her enchanted moments. And I do think that this one had like some literary references or some examples where she talks about legend. She talks about it being legendary. She talks about rekindled flames. There's like there's a mention of a glow, like whenever we're talking about things that are glowing, glittery. There's some things that she mentions like ghost or truths or I'm trying to sorry, I'm like scrolling through the lyrics in real time as I'm looking at love, and then of course like love of life, there's phantoms, there's talks of rings, there's this kind of abstraction in some of the words that she mentions in here that try to take something that would be like really really ordinary in relationship but like link it to things that go beyond, that are a little bit more epic, that are more elevated than just these mundane things that you have in everyday life. And I felt like this song had all that, and it kind of makes sense if you're trying to talk about like kind of a faded relationship, something that is bigger or larger than life.
This song is so sad, and the music is so sad.
Yeah.
And very staccato.
To be clear, it's a very sad album. I just thought there was more anger than I was expecting. I don't think there's a ton of anger, but I was expecting an album of all this type of song.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. I also picked like one of the saddest. I picked one of the saddest songs on the Sado. Yeah.
Well, just going right in. I don't know, but I'm covering track 5, so we can talk. You don't get to tell me about sad. Is that's the line?
No, I mean, and I guess that's my point. It's like, yeah, it's a sad song, but I feel like it was like one of those. This is one of those lore-like songs, right? Like she has the starry-eyed references. She has like the kiss to getting married. She has the Holy Ghost, and then of course, like love of my life. It's just like this idea that it was a relationship that was bigger than just a mundane relationship is kind of why I had the note of an enchanted.
Yeah, there's nothing mundane about about this experience. Like, you shit talked me under the table, talking rings and talking cradles. I wish I could unrecall how we almost had it all. Like, that is, you're talking about forever.
Well,
and
even the word choice,
life.
it's like you could have said we talked about marriage and having kids or having babies, but it's rings and cradles. It's a story. It feels very literary, but also it feels very like epic saga. Like, I don't know, I just see rings and I think of Lord of the Rings, or like faded rings, or like promise rings. I don't know, like rings are such a loaded word when you use it.
Paper rings.
Yeah, exactly. So she's not just talking about marriage, she's talking about rings. Yeah.
Well, in this one, of kind of going back to the thing I said at the top of the episode about the tropes, this one is a little bit of like the one that got away trope of looking back at a relationship that was so good and it kind of slipped through your fingers. And if at a high level, if you start going through this album, each song kind of bounces around. This is not specific lyrics, but it's interesting still. Of so like in this one, she's kind of the victim a little bit. Like, she's experienced loss, she's experiencing pain. I would also say like guilty as sin. She's kind of damsel in distress. She's also the victim. She's experiencing a bad situation. But then you have Who's Afraid of Little Me, where she's very much the villain. She's very much attacking. And it's interesting because they all are very sincere, very genuine, but there's like an identity crisis in this album of who am I? What role am I playing in this story? And the reality of the human experience is all of the above can be true, but we want that answer. This album is like someone, to me, just like screaming, I want an answer. And we get that in The Prophecy of change my fate, change my story, give me a plot that is simple, that makes sense, that's what I want. But that's just not the human experience, which is why I think the messiness of this album works so well.
We get a lot of that. I mean, in How Did It End? And I'll talk about that song, right? Like, there's a lot of questioning in this album, whether it's about identity or about of her identity, about the relationships that she's talking about. Like, there's a lack of clarity.
Well,
and poetry seems to be her way of trying to get to clarity, and I don't think she gets to any other clarity other than, I wrote it down, I got it out, and now it's not mine. That doesn't mean there's clarity or closure, but it is processing. So this is an album of processing, but not necessarily understanding.
Well, so this kind of actually transitions nicely into the second song that I had picked, which the second song I picked was I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, which is track 13.
My anthem. Like,
mine too.
where was this song when I was in high school? Because it would have been my away message constantly.
Yeah. It's a track 13 written by Taylor and Jack. It's like very much a Jack song, and for people who love the Taylor Jack Antonoff pairing, like I do, like this is like hands down my favorite song on the album. But this is one where we have her like taking that sadness, like showcasing a different side of her. She had a broken heart, but like she's talking about how she did what she does best, and she did it all with a broken heart. It's a little bit of like, to me, this song was a little bit of like rubbing in your face, like you all saw this, but here's what I had going on. I focus here on the quotations in the first verse. She's having the time of her life there in her glittering prime. The lights refract sequin stars off of her silhouette every night. I can show you lies. I had like big flashback to just Eras Tour. Like the fact that this line was in quotations, literary device that just makes you think that somebody is saying something. It's giving validity to these words. These are not her words. It feels like they're other people's words. And when did we hear these words? I mean, I have said these words about her at some point. Like, who wouldn't describe this author as being in the prime of her life or doing it all? Or like she was on a stage in these glittery sequin outfits night after night after night, and so much so that all of us also dressed up in glittery sequin outfits. It was such a iconic look, and she starts with that. And to me, this is like a holding up like a mirror, or like the author like rubbing it in the faces of the people who are listening and just saying like, you all said these things, and here's what was going on behind the scenes.
I didn't see it as much of like a rubbing it in your face. I experienced it more as like a through gritted teeth. Like, I can do this with a broken heart. Like, the line, I cry a lot, but I am so productive. It's an art. I mean, really felt that in my bones. This is depression and what it's like to be an overachiever with depression. You're like, I'm just going to channel this into perfectionism and getting straight A's and being, making sure that nobody can tell that I am breaking inside.
Yeah.
Because I can't let people see that I am breaking, because that will break me even further.
I could see the through gritted teeth kind of, or think of it like scoffing maybe. I mean, the line to me at the end where it says, you're good enough when you can even do it with a broken heart. Yeah. Like it's that sarcasm. It's that like flippancy of
lights,
something.
Camera, bitch, smile.
Yeah. And I mean, for something that is like clearly a very, this is definitely one, Jen, where I like felt like the anger, that you're talking about. It's like, here's what I had to do.
Yeah.
Like, here's what I went through and what I had to do and what I had to listen to. Like, nobody knows other than me, like how I got through this. And you hear it here.
And I think this is also the other theme that I see in a couple of these songs is criticism of the public, of even fans, right? Like, there's a lot that we as fans assume about her and her experience and who she is. And the reality is we don't know. And that's kind of what she's saying in this song is like, you do not know. What you see is not what I am actually feeling or experiencing.
Yeah.
She is a professional. She is doing her job.
Yeah.
And I think that, in this day and age and having parasocial relationships with celebrities, especially with her, because she writes so personally, it's easy to think that we know her and know what's happening, or that we have a right to know what's happening. Like, we don't.
Yeah.
She is a human being.
Yeah.
And I think that came across loud and clear on this album in a way that, I hadn't.
But I actually, more than she's a human being, I felt like in this song, she was showing that like this is the first time where I feel like as a writer, she does a lot of like trying to connect to you in a very humble way. It's like lyrics that are very personal. And to be honest, like I connected with the song, even though I'm nowhere near doing whatever she's doing or had that same kind of situation.
Yeah.
However, this is the first time I think I hear her like kind of shamelessly bragging that she is better than us. I kind of like, you know, like this is not just like a me and you are the same. This is like, no, I'm
Right.
better. Like, come at me. Like, try to take my job. The last lyrics is like, you know, I mean, first of all, she says, you know, you can do
you
it.
can't do this.
You know, you can do it. You know, you're good when you can do it with a broken heart. And then she's like, yeah, try and come for my last lyrics, which I was like jaw dropped at that because in the time of AI, I don't know, like it's just like such a thing. But she's not just saying like I'm relatable. She's like, no, I'm good. And that the whole chorus, because I'm a real tough kid. I can handle my shit. They said you got to fake it till you make it. And I did. Lights, camera, bitch, smile, even when you want to die. I mean, there's nothing here about being like, we're all in this together. This was her saying like, I did the impossible and that's how good I am.
It's very, she's definitely the hero in this one, but it's like bitter resentment. Hero. It gives me almost like, like, you know, Captain America. That's the first
I was thinking older sibling. I was, you know, like nobody asked for this, but I did it anyway.
Well, I was thinking like Captain America. Imagine him like, you know, he's been doing this forever since whatever he like was frozen or something. Basically, it's a superhero who has been saving the world, who has been showing up every day for years and years and years, just like kind of coming back to the team and just like throwing his shield down and being like, I'm fucking exhausted. I have been doing this every single day. None of you can do what I do. And you guys are not appreciating this enough. Just kind of like that, like, I hit my breaking point. Here's my rant. I have been doing something no one else can do. But like, I'm the hero. I am special. I can do something incredible. Yet it's not enough. Yet no one understands. Yet no one sees the person. Like that kind of thing. I feel like those rants exist in movies.
Mr. Incredible and The Incredibles. He's like saving all those people. And then they're like, well, you can't anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of also... I mean, I was thinking like the older sibling syndrome where you're like, I had to do it all first. I had to do it without guidance. I had to do this. I had to do that. And it's like younger siblings everywhere who are like, nobody asked you. But you're like, if I can do it, like, I don't know. Like, you know, like it's that idea of like, I did it. But we
did ask her.
Yeah.
We did ask her what?
To do all of this. We've been begging for a tour. We've been begging for more music. Like, I totally get the older sibling thing too, but this is very much a like, she is enjoying this. She does this because she wants to do it, but like this is
at what cost?
Yeah, like the demand is there. This isn't her doing this in a vacuum. Like
demand is there, but it's also like doing it without ever stopping. Like people wanted more dates. She added the more dates.
Yeah, like for miles.
And she had to be the best, so she did the best. But it's like being the best despite being broken. It's like you did it at your worst. Yeah. You were at your all-time high while feeling at your worst is like the biggest gap. And so therefore in some ways she's over delivering, right? And going beyond her abilities. So anyways, it's the sadness, but it's a different side to it. It's the anger. And it's like that, like now that you know what I was going through, like, let's put that in context with what I did at the same time. And that's why I kind of really see it as like a rubbing in your face. The last song I did was So High School, but do we want to jump to some of the other ones? Because that's a little later.
No, can we talk about So High School for like a hot second? Because another favorite of mine, which I was surprised that this is Aaron.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is actually like kind of a happier song on the album. Yeah. And it is different. But yeah, it's like a happy but slightly subdued because it is like I hear the Aaron for sure. But it's not like as upbeat and jumpy, but
it also felt like, I don't know how to say this other than the music felt like high school. It felt like early 2000s.
Okay, yeah. So I was just gonna say, so the thing that I loved about the song is that she picks a theme and she goes all in, right? And the theme here was high school. And so throughout this song, whether it's in the music or in the lyrics, she's got these high school references littered throughout the whole thing. And I think that was very cool, just like how she goes in. But like we have, I mean, an American Pie reference, like throwback. You have Mary Kiss Kill. You have
Truth or Dare, Spin the Bottle.
Truth or Dare, Spin the Bottle. We have Twinkling Lights.
Scout's Honor.
Reference. Yeah. I'm trying to see if there was
What was the
Friday Night
line that
Lights
stood out to
reference.
you here? What was your favorite line in this song?
I mean, I know you've already done the "You Know How to Ball." I know Aristotle on TikTok, but that is an amazing
the best
line.
It's amazing line.
I think I love the "cause I feel so high school" every time that repeat. Like I think that the fact that she picked a theme and then went with it throughout is kind of like what I really, really loved about this. "Cause I feel so high school" is such a great way to summarize a feeling. And like I was just like, as someone who, like, my husband and I met in high school, and I just like, as listening to this song, like, I love that you can summarize a feeling by a moment in time. So the idea that you can say, I feel so high school, and everyone just kind of gets exactly what that means. I love that.
I will say, for me, something feeling so high school is not a positive. I was an idiot. So
but I think that also is in the song. Like, I think there's a lot of idiotic things in this song because everyone's an idiot in high school, right?
Yeah,
gosh. Do we need time to talk about it? Should we make space for you to talk about, or should we do a whole high school episode and that will open up all of the
we should do that, but I might need to be drunk for that episode.
Hey, that's fine. Maybe that's high school. That's okay.
I have been a rule follower all my life, and let me tell you, it has made me not an interesting person. But
I think you're very interesting. Anyway.
Thank you. I can share one of mine that is very light that I just thought was an incredible line.
Yeah.
First listen through, Florida was and still continues to be my favorite, actually.
Okay, say more, because first listen on Florida was hard for me. I was like, I don't get it.
Oh, I don't get it either. But the sound is... I don't totally understand it. The sound, there's a very specific, like, Chris and I don't have a ton of overlap in music, but there's a very specific, like, indie pop sound. And I immediately, like, as soon as I saw him after listening to the album, I played this for him, and halfway through he was like, yeah, right, I like this song. And I was like, yeah,
it's
I knew you would.
It's a very cathartic feeling.
It is very cathartic. But the line in particular, and my friends all smell like weed or little babies.
Yes!
I lost my mind at that. I was like, yeah, that's my 30s. That's it. 100%.
Yeah, I sent it to my friend. I sent that to my friend group because I was like, here you go. Here's the line.
I feel like this song was such a vibe. Like, it captured, I think that's what she was going for, but it's also
Florida.
It feels like the least Floridian song, but also Florida in a song.
Yes.
Like,
well,
right?
She released, there's an audio clip of her explaining the song a little bit on one of the radio stations, and someone did it on TikTok. And she was like, I listen to a lot of Dateline, and when, like, they get into trouble or whatever, like, they escape to Florida. And so I just, like, had this feeling of, like, when you're trying to, like, escape a feeling, and I'm paraphrasing poorly, like, they go to Florida and they get away with shit. And it's like, yeah.
But I also think it's at the end of the day, it's also a metaphor for, there's a place that is this, like, lawless land of, like, kind of chaos, but, like, passion and all of this. And I can escape there. I can run away there. And
anything goes.
I actually think it very weirdly goes well with the I Hate It Here song, where it's like there's a place in my mind I go to. And I feel like there's a parallel with these songs of this idea of escapism, of something in my mind, something imaginary, because this is definitely a metaphorical song. But at the end of the day, like, even if you go to Florida, you don't actually escape your problems. You can take a little break, you can go on vacation, but there's this constant, like, metaphor desire for escape, and she keeps creating these places. The song was just, instead of saying, hey, I'm creating this place, we just started off in the place with the song.
And I like what you're saying about, like, you think that you're escaping your troubles, but you're not really. Like, they don't actually go away, but it does feel like this kind of Neverland kind of weird place where you can just, like, get away. And I just feel like Miami is not that.
So I Hate It Here was your other song?
No, I just saw the comparison. The other song I really loved pretty immediately was Who's Afraid of Little Ol' Me.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to say that about every song. It was really hard to pick. I was like, guys, I know one song I want to do, but for 2 and 3, I could do any of them.
Yeah. Well, I pulled out this one. One, I really loved this song. I think it's a very it's actually again the tropes were just, every author plays with tropes. You have to. You can't get away with it. But the amount in this album that was so obvious to me was just insane, which was kind of fun for me to play with. But there's a very common trope of, particularly in romance novels, of tiny women who are actually terrifyingly strong and smart or powerful if we're getting into fantasy. And so this very much was kind of playing with that of like, Who's Afraid of Little Me? And then the music change of like, You Should Be was so good. But particularly the line, I was tame, I was gentle till the circus life made me mean, I wanted to bring up because when we did our Mad Woman episode again and we discussed Mad Woman, we talked about the animal imagery and she's doing it again here. However, in Mad Woman, it was very nature in nature. So, you know, of course, these animals are going to do these things in nature. And this time we take a turn and we say, well, what if we take an animal, take them out of nature, put them in a circus? Of course it's going to change the animal. It's functionally torture. Like that's what's happening to, you know, animals being taken out of their natural habitat, being forced to perform. And I thought it was an interesting escalation of Mad Woman, of saying like, yeah, of course animals get mad, but then we escalate to say, well, yeah, of course animals get mad when you take them from their home, when you put them and force them to perform for people, for show, and they don't get to be animals. It's going to make them mean. I just thought it was an interesting escalation of this metaphor.
And this is a good opportunity to say, because you mentioned animals, and we have an upcoming episode on animal theory. And we have pre-recorded most of our upcoming episodes. So there are going to be Tortured Poets Department songs that would fit perfectly with some of the episodes we have coming up. But unfortunately, we recorded them before this album came out. So when you listen to them and you're like, you missed a really good one, it's because they didn't exist.
And the idea of where it says they say they didn't do it to hurt me, but what if they did? The idea of being made that way. There's also a line here where she says, you wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me. And to me, that reminds me also of I Did It With a Broken Heart, of like, you couldn't do it. Like, you wouldn't last. That you guys were talking about earlier, of like, we did ask for it. Like, we, the fans, did ask for this. Like, we did kind of make her this way. Like, we did force her to do this. And I see some parallels also in this song, and that feeling of the kind of resentment of kind of like, I'm having to do something extreme for a reason, and it's taking a toll.
TikTok's really having fun with that line though, because they're like, the asylum, you mean the Christmas tree farm you grew up on?
Well, I think
too literal, guys, too literal.
The going on with the animal imagery though, like you didn't mean to hurt me, or did you? And there's something about like they took away my teeth or something like that. The idea of training an animal is often called breaking. You're breaking the animal. And there are ways to do that are training and loving and just saying, hey, let's learn each other, let's like understand what's going on. And then but for a long time and still today, a lot of people do it through very violent, very angry ways to make the animal submissive to what you want them to do. And the imagery in this is not the mutually beneficial way of learning one another, and is very much a like trying to create a submissive animal. But I think the message of the song to me is, you tried and you failed. Like, you tried to break me, but maybe I got a little bit mean, but I still held out. Like, you wouldn't survive what I went through, but that means that I did survive, which I think is interesting.
I think the song is also, to me, it's you created me. Like, you're afraid of me. You should be, because you made me this way, right? Like, I can do it with a broken heart because you made me do it with a broken heart. And so again, like, I go back to like, this is a commentary and this is a conversation that she is having with her fans, in that in Summation, she's saying, my fellow members, like, I'm talking to you. And I think it is very, we as fans are often very protective of Taylor Swift, but we also are very critical of her and expect a lot of her. And she is like, yeah, you expect a lot of me. Don't,
Yeah.
this.
I'm also thinking of
you
the imagery
created
in the
me.
Fortnite video where she's on the when she's belted in
The Frankenstein.
Yeah, the Frankenstein imagery of like her being created to be a monster.
Literally made is the idea.
Literally made. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming together. It's coming together is a very significant theme here. And you're selling me on the anger, Jen. Like I'm like, oh,
it's there.
I get it.
You're like, oh yeah, it's like, well, this is a Reputation song. Yeah. This song is like Reputation and Mad Woman.
Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about had some anger too. I honestly just wanted to talk about the fucks and Down Bad.
Yes. Just the fucks, though. You don't want to talk about the metaphor, just the fucks.
Well, the metaphor is really interesting, but the fucks, is this the first time she's had fuck in the chorus?
No.
Because it's like a key part of the chorus, like more so than I recall from other songs.
It's the most times between this and Florida.
Yeah.
But she's...
Oh, well, the only thing I wanted to say about Florida was, what's the line in Florida? They were like, fuck it, Florida, or like, I don't know. It's going to be the tagline of the election season.
Oh yeah.
Fuck it up or something like that. Anyway.
But so we have, fuck it if I can't have him, I might just die, it would make no difference. Fuck it if I can't have us, I might not just get up, I might stay. So it's very much a depression thing here of like, well, like, fuck it, if this isn't going to happen, then what's the point of anything? But then I think it gets really interesting to me in the chorus because those are very despairy to me. It's not an angry fuck it there. It's kind of a like, well, fuck it, like, I'm depressed, I can't do anything, nothing's worth it. But in the bridge, it changes to, because fuck it, I was in love, so fuck you if I can't have us. And I thought that was so interesting to me. This very aggressive curse word was being used in this kind of like, I'm throwing it away, I'm throwing my life away, nothing's worth it. And then we have that just quick turn in the bridge, which we often get that turn, but it turns from being like kind of angry, giving up, to turn into that person and saying, actually, no, fuck you. This is like your fault. Like that you get this like moment of anger in there in a song that for the rest of it is kind of a like, I'm down bad, I'm heartbroken, I want this person. But then she turns. I was like,
just Googled.
No.
I tried to Google how many fucks are in the Tortured Poets department. Nobody's counted them yet.
I wanted to ask what, like, I think you just kind of started to get into this, Jen, but what does down bad mean?
Like, I've got it bad. Like, I've come down. I don't even.
Is it just like a
really
low?
I get it. I get it.
A lower low.
Yeah.
Like,
not low, but
so,
like,
when you think, I think the good example, if you say I'm down with the flu, you're saying I have been completely taken out by this sickness.
You're like,
I cannot get up. I cannot do anything. And I'm down bad for this person. Like, I am functionally...
Feeling of being so attracted to someone, you almost feel depressed that you two aren't together.
Oh, yeah. It's like so a mix of I have it bad, but like also...
Yeah, I've got it bad. Right. Like, it's mostly used to refer to basic feelings of longing, desperation, sadness, depression, loneliness. Like, I need this person.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, I think the illness metaphor kind of hurts. Like, it helps if you say, I'm like, oh man, I'm totally down with the flu. You can't do anything else. So if you're down bad for someone, it's functionally that debilitating with how into it you are.
And she says, like, I might just not get up, I might stay down bad.
Yeah.
But I love in this song, I love that you want to talk about the fucks, but this was a fascinating song because she's got this alien abduction metaphor, which is, I think, new territory.
Cosmic love,
for her.
yeah.
Cosmic like, love. Did you really beam me up? And again, like, in this first listen, I'm like, beam me up, Scotty? She's a Trekkie? Like, what? Okay.
Hey, there's a lot of alien sex in Star Trek, so it's not a Star Trek song.
I'm reminded of Toxic by Britney Spears as like a weird spaceship kind of.
Yeah, that's a good one. But now I'm down bad crying at the gym. I'm like, I get it. Again, there were just, to me, the lyrics that I grasped onto were, as I always do, were ones where I'm like, oh oh, that's me. Like I just related very, very deeply. And so I go back to like, I don't care who she wrote them about because it's not like I love them because I'm like, oh, you just described what I'm feeling. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very love bomby. And a lot of the relationshipy songs, she has very little control over the situation, which is interesting. And this is one of those where there was a love bomb, something changed, and now she's just kind of stuck waiting. And that happens a lot in the relationship songs in this album. The ones where she has power tend to be more about like other people and don't have that romantic undertone.
I'm super excited to eventually do a deep dive on this one because I think this one is such a loaded song. I think they all are, but this one in particular, I feel like it's one of those where like we're going to start analyzing it and it's going to be about something totally different than what we thought it was about.
It's a really
Normally I don't
extended
care
metaphor.
what Taylor says, but I'm pretty sure she straight up said the song was about love bombing, so I did pull that phrase from her words.
Well, even love bombing is like, I mean, it's vague. Like, I don't know, like that's one thing, but it's just, I don't know, as you start going through each of these things, I just feel like it's such a, there's a lot of really weird references in this entire song. Like
This song has, like hostile takeovers. I was like, oh, clearly you come from the business world, Taylor.
I mean, the alien references to like the whole like do experiments on again, like reminds me of the Frankenstein.
She went deep into this extended metaphor of being abducted by aliens.
Yeah.
And it is just a very, it's not something we have heard from her before.
I'm not going to lie to you. And I also know my family listens to this. I'm so sorry, family, for telling you this. I immediately thought of just to do experiments on as weird sex things. That was 100% my first thought.
There's a lot of songs
situation.
on this. There's a lot of songs on this. Like a little bit on that note, there's a lot of lyrics on this album that are very sexual. That I'm like, your parents listen to this. How does that feel, Taylor? Because they get very personal.
I feel like once you become a billionaire, you no longer answer to your parents.
I don't know. Her mom seems like there's a lyric, and I think the thank you, Amy, where like my mom.
Everyone knows my mom's a saint, and even she wanted to see you dead.
I mean,
great line. Loved that line.
She's a billionaire. She can do whatever she wants. You know, like she's.
I don't think we're talking about that song, but we should because that was an epic song. Another great metaphor.
I think Reputation, the album, kind of popped that bubble of discussing her sex life. Now she's just doing whatever.
Bless. Another thing that she has to do for her career that like we didn't make her do.
She just doesn't care anymore. Like I get the sense of like because she's always been so thankful for her fans.
Forthright.
And she's always like, it's all about the fans. I love my fans. I feel like with this album,
but there's a cost.
No,
to
but
that.
she just doesn't care anymore. She's like, I'm done pretending. I'm tired of caring. I feel like we've kind of seen that in the news cycles in this past year, where she's just like, talk about me all you want. Say what you want. I don't care. Past caring. And I'm like, girl has hit billionaire status. Like she doesn't answer to anybody, you know, like do what you want. Live your best life.
Yeah. I was gonna be like, actually, but then when I think about this album, one of the criticisms was like, well, there's not really like radio hits. And it's like, yeah, because she doesn't need to have radio hits. Like she wrote what she wanted versus what's going to be tailored specifically to pop audiences. And so, all the criticisms that like, it's just a lot. I'm like, it is a lot. It's poetry. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. Was that your 3, Jen?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I'm going to go in track order. So I'm going to start with apparently the most devastating song. They're in an album of devastating songs. Track 5, So Long London, Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. London's my favorite place in the world, so this hit hard. The lines that like I wrote next to them, relatable AF. And my friend said, it isn't right to be scared every day of a love affair. Every breath feels like the rarest air when you're not sure if he wants to be there. So that is very personal. Shocking it's in the bridge. But yeah, this song, You know, it's, I don't know, Jen, what trope? This is a hard one because this is like her grappling with. I picked 2 songs where she's trying to grapple with like, wait, what happened here?
Yeah,
She sort of takes agency, but then there are times when she doesn't.
I couldn't come up with a name for it, but it's something we recognize. Like when we talk about books like Rebecca, where it's just, or even the song Tolerate It. It's this trope, Mad Men, you know, Betty Draper and Mad Men, of this just kind of like defeated
like,
woman who really genuinely wanted love, but is just not getting it, and is
trying.
It feels like we're like, you know, 2 steps away from or even just 1 step away from like guilty as sin, where this is the step before they start fantasizing about someone else, or, you know, try to find some other way to feel alive. But this just kind of like stuck in a loveless relationship, sadness. There's not like a word for it, but it is a well-known story.
It's the line in the chorus. So how much sad did you think I had? Right? Like, I think that's a great summary of the song.
What did you expect? This, I'm now seeing it again. I process in real time on this podcast. This is like the immediate next song after You're Losing Me, right? You're Losing Me is like the act, like literally you are in right now losing me, here are all the things. And in that song, she says, I can't find a pulse. And then in this song, she says, so long, and I stopped CPR. After all, it's no use. The spirit was gone. So this feels like this was like the immediate next step. But I really struggled with like what the song is about, and I don't want to go too far into it because we'll deep dive it. But the whole 2 graves, 1 gun really also, I really tried to chew on, because that's saying like they both ended up dead, but 1 person did it. And it doesn't really, because there's only 1, right? Otherwise, because at first I was like, there's no blame here, but there is blame. There's only 1 gun. It wasn't a mutual thing.
I was surprised, but I think like the lyric that I found most surprising in this song was "So long, London, you'll find someone." I do like, to your point about the blame. I think I went in thinking there might be more of like a stance on like who is at fault here, but that's not the point of the song. I don't think it's pointing fingers. No. I think it is like, this is the end.
We had a good run.
Unfortunate. It was very tragic. We're both losers, essentially. Like, we both lost.
Yeah. We both lost. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. It's devastating. This was the first song.
Very defeated kind of feeling of just like, there is no hope. Like,
no, and that's why, and I think that I don't know that I see anger in this song, which maybe is why it's a track 5, because it is just over
and
exhaustion
sad and tiredness. Tiredness.
I kept calm and carried the weight of the rift. Like, I just, again, that's like one of the wordplay elements that I love here. There's a lot from like a poetic devices perspective that really make it very pleasing to listen to. I didn't opt in to be your odd man out. Like, there's a lot of repetition that just make this song very, very pleasing, even though it is very, very sad.
Yeah, this was definitely what I expected the album to be.
You thought it would be all this?
Yeah. I'm glad it wasn't.
I'm glad it's not.
I know.
Because that would just be too much. I can't handle that right now.
I mean, it was a lot of this.
So my next... Yeah.
Well, I was expecting all.
Yeah, because, okay, so that was track 5. Track 6 is my next song, But Daddy, I Love Him, which is very different. Okay, so
it's got country vibes to me. It felt a little OG Taylor.
Yeah, so last week we released an episode deep diving Love Story. This is Love Story grown up.
I did think that, yeah.
Right? Because in Love Story...
Yeah, I put forbidden love as the trope, so yeah.
My daddy said stay away from Juliet. You had a lot of the townspeople...
What if it's like the in-between of Love Story, of like before he comes back? I mean, this is 2 decades later.
Okay, you're not gonna make me go down that rabbit hole again.
Wait,
thank you very much.
When is the pregnancy happening here?
When is I will tell you. screaming, "But daddy, I love him. I'm having his baby." No, I'm
That's
not.
right.
But you should see your face.
I totally
so
forgot
glad
about that
you
line
said that.
until
That was
this
not
moment.
that was not planned. It was not prepared.
Oh my gosh, I
You
totally
said
forgot
it,
that
not
was in
me.
this song.
I'm glad y'all came to the same conclusion. Thank you.
I love it. So what I love about, I mean, there's a lot of things I love about this song, but I think that this one, this is again about, there's anger here, but it is not at the guy. It is at everybody else. It is, and the line, there were two sections of lines that I love. God save the most judgmental creeps who say they want what's best for me, sanctimoniously performing soliloquies I'll never see. Like that is fucking killer. And then all the wine moms are still holding out, but fuck them, it's over. I'm like,
that line, I want a t-shirt of that line.
So
good.
I wanted to I actually, now that you mention Love Story Grown Up, Jody, I feel like we should do like a line by line comparison, honestly, at some point, because the point where
We will.
like he was
We will.
Romeo, there is actually a line in this that says he was chaos, he was revelry. And we talked so much about what does Romeo actually mean? Does it just mean he's an epic lover or whatever? Or does it feel like here she has spelled out what it is? And I like really wonder if that was an exercise.
I think that we might need to start breaking our format and doing a different format, which is like a side-by-side comparison of songs. Because I think as her discography grows, we're seeing more and more parallels come up. And I think, in fact, because I just re-listened to the episode that we launched last week on Love Story, we say like, oh, I'd love to compare this to like a love song, you know, what she actually thinks love is like. And I don't know that this is what she actually thinks love is like, but I think it's a similar situation, except she's focusing less on, you know, I need this guy to save me, and more on criticizing the people who are criticizing her and her relationship. And so again, I go back to I don't even remember what song we were talking about. I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, where she's, or even Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, she's directly talking to people who are criticizing her, and is like, what are you doing? Like, she calls them saboteurs. She calls you know, she talks about the elders had convened. Like, there's so much judgment.
Sarah's and Hannah's in their
Sarah's and Hannah's. I'm so sorry to everybody named Sarah's and Hannah's who clutch their pearls. So particularly if you live in the South, like, that's just as bad as the name Amy now, apparently, although Amy's even worse.
Yeah, it was very Southern coded, like Southern Belle-esque small town in the South type of, with the elders, and the daddy just kind of brings a little bit of like a Southern Belle, which I thought
there's a lot of people in town that I bestow upon my fakest smiles.
Yeah,
it's like it just and again it I go back to the poem, in Summation poem, where she's like, I had a temporary moment of insanity, and like you all saw it. Like, this was us seeing us, the townspeople, like seeing her moment of insanity, saying, but daddy, I love him.
But like, I know you guys don't disagree with me on this, so I'm not saying this to you, but like, this is just me to the world. She's allowed moments of insanity. We all are. That's what it means to be human. Like, I know we know that, but this album was like, it really hit me of a like, I know there's nothing I can personally do, but like, gosh, I just want to give her privacy. Like, I love the art, and I just like, just the rest of it, you do whatever you want.
Feels though, but that's not how everyone feels, right?
Which is
like,
why I'm not yelling at you two.
yeah, you're yelling at our listeners. That's fine.
I don't think our listeners.
No, our listeners are the wise ones.
Well, because
we're all the wise ones.
And I understand, like, I love celebrity gossip, or I used to love celebrity gossip. I feel a little bit differently about it now, but you want to know what's going on, right? Like, I think it is natural to enjoy gossip of any kind, right? Look at, you know, Pride and Prejudice. Like, it's all about like what's happening.
Well, It's a give and take relationship. I mean, celebrities do profit off
Yeah.
of this
But
investment, like all the time that people invest. It sometimes has other
Correct.
costs as well. I mean, you don't earn that money like willy nilly, right? Like there's always like
yeah, you sell
I
your
don't know,
soul.
just it's an
Yeah.
exchange. Yeah, it's like you're selling something, and that's what people are consuming. We're the consumers, and we're buying what you're
There's
selling.
But I think
also
to us.
there's also just the gender element that men of that fame don't experience the scrutiny, the
No.
critiques to the same level. And then we can even go further, like a woman of color would have it harder. You know, like there's so many layers of bias, which I know we know, and like it's just this like constantly, in my mind, this constantly evolving thing of like, yes, like they know what they're getting into, but also at the same, like then they are suffering prejudices at a massive scale, you know, that we might. Here's my advice to everyone. If you want to keep in touch with gossip, just like stay in touch with someone who worked at a prior company of yours that was a little toxic. And let me tell you, that fulfills all of my gossip needs. Just seeing what's happening at some old companies. I'm good. I'm covered. I don't need tabloids.
I'm the one that's still at the company, so I guess I'm the one.
I think there's also a level of like the level of
Yes.
fame. Once you hit this, like, yeah, there's elements of gender and race and everything, but once you hit a certain caliber of fame, the reason that I kept bringing up, like, she's a billionaire now, because part of the tabloids this year have been about how she's like the first celebrity to do it without investments. It's like her money alone, right? That got her to that $1 billion status. This is a woman who is now being compared to the likes of Michael Jackson and the Beatles and I don't know, like Elvis Presley. Like we're talking about the greats of the world, right? Every time she sets a new record, there was one in the summer where she was being compared to the Beatles. And it's like, none of these people ended up sane. Right, like there was insanity for all of them. You reach a certain level of fame and you're kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, okay, what is the cost of this really? Like what do you lose along the way to get to that level? And I feel like in this album she's being a little upfront about it and just being very candid about being and critiquing, I think for the first time, her fans, and really like holding up that mirror and being like, look at what you're doing to me. But not even in like an ungrateful
No.
way, like in a very candid way.
Here's an awareness of, and it's a holding up a mirror, I think you said, and I think that's the right thing.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my last song, How Did It End? Question mark. Track 21, Taylor Swift and Aaron Dessner. It's a rhetorical question. We have a rhetorical question episode coming up in the next couple weeks. I apologize that we didn't have this song.
We still chose great songs. They're still good songs.
No, we did. Let's be clear. And we will find another way to incorporate the song. We've got like 10 years of, now we have more. Now we probably have like 20 years of material.
Oh, we added multiple years to how long we could be doing this.
Guys, we need sponsorship. Anyway, How Did It End? I think this is another song where she's talking about like the critiques and the criticism, because we hear come one, come all, it's happening again. The empathetic hunger descends. Like empathetic hunger. That also the word empathetic. She uses empaths in But Daddy, I Love Him. She calls them vipers dressed in empaths' clothing. So again, like she's saying that the people, her fans, the public, whatever you call them, are empaths or empathetic, but like not really, right? You have vipers and empaths clothing. You have empathetic hunger descends. Like you're taking something that's supposed to be very, I don't know that empath is positive, but it's feeling, right? Someone who feels, and making it really negative. Anyway, that wasn't even the line that I love here, but I say this because it connects to the previous song where we're talking, like it's the people saying how did it end in most of the song, and it's only at the end that it's her saying I can't pretend like I understand how did it end. But the line that I love the best is my beloved ghost in me sitting in a tree, DYING, because it is just this beautiful flip of sitting in it,
tree.
so and so sitting in a tree, KISSING, which is about falling in love, right? First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in a baby carriage, and here it is about like she's made it about the end of it, like we're dying. This is actually over, and I just thought,
but also
so creative and clever.
Also, like that little chant has never been said kindly. Like it's a teasing thing that kids say in
It is,
school.
but it
like it's
brings
such a
me to back to like So High School, right, where she talks about other things that are very like childish. I mean, I don't know, truth or
No, but this is like it's meant to be like an antagonizing chant. Like in elementary school when kids
well, it's antagonizing because you're embarrassed, right? Like you're embarrassed that like to be seen with a guy and to be.
But I'm like the people who do the chanting, they like do they have positive intentions ever? Like
That's
it's
true.
kids who are like making
That's
fun
fair.
of someone,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a song
That's
that is
actually,
sung with like
I
people
didn't think of
pointing
it that way, and that's
fingers.
a really good way. That is, and you're right. This whole song is about people pointing fingers, being like, "Oh my god, it ended! Like, well, how did it end? Oh my god, they called it. Did you hear? They called it off. How did it end?" And like, we all do that, whether it's Taylor Swift or somebody else in our lives. We're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, they broke up. Oh my god, what happened? How did it end?" Like, we have
Yeah.
this curiosity, and I think curiosity is. Sorry. My coach also listens to this podcast, and where we talk often. Hi, Sue, love you. We talk about judgment versus curiosity, right? You don't want to lead with judgment; you want to lead with curiosity. And so there's a curiosity in how did it end, but this song is about the judgment. How did it end? Right? It's not a positive, or it's not a inquisitive. I want to know I'm curious about how it end. It's this judging. Guess who we ran into? Did you hear? They called it off.
And I think
which is very toxic.
I think it's judgmental because of the chorus, well, for many reasons, but I think the fact that the chorus starts with a come one, come all,
Yes.
which I'm just now piecing together, is I view that as a circus thing. The come on all, come on, come one, come all, the magical blah blah blah, come see their show, like a circus kind of traveling show. And so it's again, the song is doing it too, of she is this like being treated like this an unhuman circus event of like, if you think about like original circuses or like carnivals, you have like they weren't very loving. Like the bearded woman was not looked at with admiration for the most part. Like you think about like these like side shows, it feels like a sideshow, which we also get in Getaway Car, where she says like, you and me honey, we're a sideshow. So maybe we should do a circus episode at some point. But it's very much the pointing and laughing is good. I think it makes me think of just, there's a lot of examples of that in literature, and it happened in reality too. But just this idea of like, we're taking someone, a real person, or even an animal, a real animal, and making them perform for us and turning their real pain into a performance. Spectacle, thank you. That is the word I was desperately looking for.
and I think because
it takes 3 people to make one brain. You're good.
Well, and because I just went on this like little talk about like this level of celebrity, I feel like I'm also like kind of tying this a little bit to that of like I'm seeing it happen again. Like this has happened before to others also. I'm not sure if that was like the intention, because here it's in the context of a relationship, but it's like this idea of like it's all happening again. The empathetic hunger descends, and we're trying to figure out how it ends. And at the very last line, like she actually still she says, "But I still don't know how did it end."
Yeah,
and I think there's this idea of also like other people who reach this level of fame also are like under this level of scrutiny. Like what happens, what do you lose along the way? Like what happens when this kind of scrutiny or making spectacle happens, and how does it end? Is it a good ending? Is it a bad ending? Do we even know?
It also just is like
morbid thought.
I think that is totally a good like interpretation, and I think it has a second way it works too, is just this idea of like those personal moments in your life, sometimes you're not ready for other people to know, even if you're not on the public stage. Like I think about even in good moments, like when Chris proposed, we waited a few hours before we called anyone. Like we wanted to kind of like process it ourselves, talk about a few things. And even in like real life, if you have a breakup, like telling people's kind of hard sometimes, and then like people know, and then people ask you. And I think there's this thing in the song of like, this speaker has not fully processed what happened before being just overwhelmed with everyone else asking the question that we get at the end. She's like, you know what? I'm asking that question too, but it actually happened to me. Like, this is my life and I don't know the answer. Like, I'm like, it just, she wasn't ready for it to be public, or wasn't ready to handle, like all the scrutiny, whatever it is. Again, even if you're not famous, sometimes things just get out and you're not ready for people to know, and that's a very stressful situation.
And we know that she hasn't quite processed it yet, because the first line is, we hereby conduct this postmortem. The whole point of a postmortem, which is something that you do like at the end of a project to like understand what went well, what didn't go well, like it's to understand it. Again, I go back to this in Summation poem, like it's just to understand, a debrief. Here are my findings, like I'm going to try and understand what just happened. And so this whole song, how could she know how it ends, because that's the whole point of conducting this post-mortem. The other definition of post-mortem would be like an autopsy. So again, you do an autopsy to figure out what happened,
figure out why something died. The autopsy one is even a more
I also find it interesting. So the other thing I wanted to say about this song was on the anthology. What is that? What it's called?
Yeah,
the extended, the like holy
the
shit, there's
version.
more.
It's
the holy shit, there's more version.
Yeah, the anthology.
So it's track 21, and so that means that we didn't know the title of the song. So that's the other thing I've been thinking about when I look at the collection of the songs that are on the anthology versus the ones that are on like where she released the title. And I feel like if she had released, because I was wondering why this song wasn't on the main album, and especially because she teased the line, we hereby conduct this postmortem, like in her like week before, scavenger hunt thing. And my assessment or my guess is because like, what a loaded title to have when there was already so much speculation about what this album would be about, that if she in February said she was going to have a song called How Did It End, we would have spent the last 2.5 months, or the majority of the world would have spent the last 2.5 months being like, oh my God, she's going to write a song. She's releasing a song about how it ended. We're going to finally figure it out. And like the whole point of the song is like, I don't know, leave me alone. Like stop trying to pry into my life. So I think that's the other very interesting thing about the double album aspect and the 16 additional songs that we got. Like we didn't have this time and period of speculation over what could these songs actually be about, because we didn't know that they existed.
She did give some title hints.
Yeah.
Not to the
we just didn't know they were songs, like the Black Dog, the Albatross.
Those weren't on, so those were bonus tracks to the original. Those are not considered part of the anthology necessarily.
But they weren't in the original. Oh, but they're on
the
records.
They were, because she had 4 versions of the original.
You're right.
Which 2 hours later, none of us picked the manuscript, but I think that might be an interesting song to end on for a hot second, because interestingly, so the manuscript is the original last track or bonus track to like the OG version, first variant.
Yeah.
It gets replaced on the Black Dog, the Albatross, and oh shit, there's another one, the Alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at, the only way to listen to the anthology is streaming. It's not in CD. You can't buy it. And when you go to the anthology, it's a different order of those bonus tracks, and the manuscript is the last song. And I personally feel like the manuscript was always meant to be the last song, and she does this where track 5 has special significance, and the last song tends to be, it says, I can't quite, it's a transition, it's a moment of closure. And Jen, you had some interesting thoughts on the manuscript that I would love for you to share.
I was even going to say to your earlier point about the 2 albums, another thing of interesting to note, the second album is pretty much her and Aaron Dessner for the most part, which is interesting to me. And again, having listened to it without the lyrics and just kind of trying to experience it, one thing I very much felt was that the first half of the anthology, the original album, feels much more manic. When I was going through
Yeah.
with the tropes, I mean, like every freaking song. There's a show on Apple TV called After Party where they're revisiting a crime and each person has a completely different genre of storytelling. And I kind of felt that a little bit with the first half of the album where I was getting very different types of stories. So it felt more jumping around. And then we get to the second half and we get more into the very Aaron Dessner type of music. It's a little bit more introspective. It's a little bit more toned down musically. And it feels like we kind of have the manic at the beginning of bouncing around. And then the second half, we're kind of like introspective a little bit more. We're a little bit more kind of like calmer musically. We still have anger, we still have sadness, we still have all those, but I feel like you do kind of go on this journey of like, this was crazy, and then I'm looking back on it and being like, yeah, that was kind of crazy. And then you get the manuscript, which again, to me, the story of the album is so much is happening. I am very stressed out. I don't know who I am. I don't know what role I play. I don't know what story I'm in, which is a very hard feeling to have, of like very untethered. And I'm trying all these things. And then the second half of the album, I'm kind of going back over them. I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, were you Peter Pan? Was I Wendy? Is there a prophecy? Is there fate? Like, we have all of these potential answers. And then the manuscript is basically like, I don't really know. Whatever it was very intense, but I wrote it all down and it's not mine anymore. So it's kind of a like, I've spent all of this time writing to this point. I wrote 30 short stories trying to understand this time of my life. It's done here. It's kind
This is
of
what
that,
I got.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that submitting the paper when you're like, it's honest, but I don't know if it makes sense, but it is what it is.
That's why, like, calling it the anthology makes a lot of sense, because I look at like this Norton anthology of poetry that I have from high school. Like, this is just a collection. It's a collection of poems from different poets, even within the 17 Emily Dickinson poems. Like, there's not a rhyme or reason. They're there. Are they her best poems? I don't know, but it's just a collection chosen. Here you go.
And I actually think, just given today, that a lot of the songs that we talked about, we actually brought it to how it's like, it feels like a dialogue between her and her fans. Maybe it's like some sort of a critique on her fame in many regards. I do think it's interesting to think about like the ending of the manuscript where she says that now it's about like how it all belongs. The story isn't mine anymore. Really line and her comment about how this story now belongs to all of her fans, and what that means, given that a lot of the songs seem to be actually like a direct dialogue to her critics and her fans and her listeners, or like maybe a lot of it is actually like more about her. Like I'm now questioning like what was on trial, the evidence that she has entered, like what was it really for? And I don't know. I feel like I'm more confused. I mean, I definitely get the chaos and the making sense, and I like the anthology piece, but I think it takes on a new meaning, right? That the story is now yours. It's for all of us to discuss it. She's almost saying like, make with it what you will. Here, I just was brutally honest and just laid out my feelings very clearly. Now do with it what you want. You go figure it out. But it's
you go figure it out. Yeah.
It takes on like a more powerful meaning, because a lot of these are like, it's kind of like, if you're holding up a mirror, it's like, it's critical of ourselves, and that she's told us like, this is for you to do with it what you want. It's like, what will we take away from it, in a way, right? And I feel like it gives that ending kind of new meaning. It's not just us analyzing some relationships or speculating about things in her lives. It's a little bit of us doing some self-reflection and thinking about like, what does this really mean? How do we treat celebrities in our society? I don't know.
I think there's two parts to it too. It actually reminds me, I was just reading, it was really old, but I was reading this interaction that Neil Gaiman had with a fan online where the fan was wanting to write some fanfic about one of his books and was asking him a question online of like, hey, can you like help me understand this character a little bit better? And then he wrote this like beautiful response that was basically like, I'm not going to answer it because my answer doesn't matter. You're writing this. This is yours. Take the story, make it your own, do what you want with it. Like, I have done what I did, but now you go do what you want to do with this material. And I think that's, you know, I even think of if you remember the book The Giver, at the end it's very ambiguous what happens, and there's a famous interview with the author for that when people will always ask her and she just turns and says, well, what do you think? And it's always kind of like, well, it says a lot about you. It forces you to engage with it and to reflect on like, well, what kind of ending do you want? Do you want a happy ending? Do you want a
Like
sad
with
ending?
Inception,
And
the spinning
I think,
top, like Christopher Nolan's, like,
yeah, exactly. And I think and I think that there's something with how intense this album is that maybe some of it's just the teacher in me, but the idea of her giving this to us and saying, make with it what you will, in some ways to me comes off as a challenge of, you go work through all of this. I worked through it writing it. Now you get to work through it listening it and to it and see what that does to you. Maybe it does nothing. Maybe it does something, but it's yours now for you to figure out. I'm done with it. Like, I have worked through, I have processed this. The only thing that's left the manuscript, she says, and at last she knew what the agony had been for. Like, she now understands. She's moving on. There's a line like, the only way, looking backwards might be the only way to move forward. Now you go do your own work with this. You process this. You decide if it means anything to you, if it changes anything for you. It's yours now. You go do the work and see what that means.
And manuscripts are like interpreted and performed in different ways too. So it's like you can take your interpretation and make it what you want. It might be something different.
I feel very validated for the death of the author that I've been arguing for. Not, I mean, you guys don't disagree with me, but this whole thing has just been validating.
Amen. Jen, telling you have earned your PhD in Taylor Swift because you have been talking about death of the author.
But even I do think like even today, as we worked through just like a fraction of the songs, like not
2 hours in 2 hours.
In 2 hours. And like the conclusions that I'm coming through about what I feel like this album is about has already kind of transformed a bit. And it's like I know that so much of this social media conversation has been about relationships and who is every song about.
The speculation.
And in a way, it's like
Jen shaking her head. Wait, for those listening and not watching on YouTube, Jen is like,
she's challenging you to not do that. She's challenging you to work through this, through the emotions, through everything the way she did and see what it does to you. Like, she's saying,
I'm like, we've already done like a fraction of the songs and have like almost unanimously like ended up somewhere totally other than a relationship. Like,
I don't think we said the word Travis Kelce at all, except for right now.
I mean, like, so many of the songs seem to be, to me, about her career or about fandom or about fame or about her relationship with people. And like, and that's just my interpretation through the limited thing that we've done so far.
And the ones that are about a relationship,
they feel ambiguous.
I was going to say, like, I listen to them and the ones I relate to, I'm like, oh, I've felt that. Like, I've been, like, I understand that. So it doesn't matter who she wrote it about, because what matters is that I feel it and experience it. And like, thank you for giving me words to put to my own emotions that I maybe wasn't able to fully articulate.
I guess what I'm saying is if her call to action is to take this album and work through it and figure it out and like the way that a lot of people have jumped on certain thoughts, but there are other interpretations of it. I think that's part of the working out process, and it almost is like it's almost like you're falling for or the way that you interpret this is going to be the challenge that she's given us, right? Like that's what she wants us to do. She wants the different interpretations. She wants people to work through it and maybe take away something, but she won't even tell us what that is. She wants you to put in the time and effort. and already we have so many different ways
Or
that we can
don't.
do it.
Right? Like put in the time and effort, or like don't, but like it's not for me. It's like, don't come asking me.
Don't bother me about it.
Don't bother me about it anymore. Like, I have
Yeah.
said what I needed to say
Yeah.
by putting out this album and by writing this all down, because that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
It's yours. I think you can go left. The road diverged. You can go left to the low-hanging fruit and be like, oh, I think this one's about this one because of this. Or you can go right and be like, huh, let me feel this. And, you know, I think, again, I go back to the way we started this conversation, which was like, how did you listen to this? What did you feel?
But it's just like some of the things that she's critiquing, I'm now realizing, are the same reactions she's getting again, right? So it's like especially when you see like the New York Times articles, the like headlines that are like people are coming out, like it's just like there are things that she is calling out and critiquing in here for us to take a hint. And some people are just like not taking the hint. Do you get what I'm saying?
Because she'd like us to bring the conversation to the AP level. And
right.
Some people just don't want to. And so we're like, you know what, Taylor, we will take this to the AP level.
Yeah, like it's like astonishing. It's like you're watching something unfold in real time.
We're so self-righteous right now. We might have to
sorry. I'm not saying that we have the right interpretation. I'm saying that like it's taken us like 9 songs to work through, and I've already ended up in a
2 hours,
different place.
9 songs.
Than maybe I thought I was going in. Like, I don't know what
we
talked about like, is the album what you thought it would be? And like 100% on branding. But now I'm like, is the album what I thought it would be? And I'm like, maybe not.
No, you're right. And I think this is why I love having these conversations, because I always come out the other side with something completely different. And I think for me, like it so what is the should we go with what is the purpose?
Well, I was gonna say I have a homework assignment that we can conclude on for our listeners.
We didn't see your spreadsheet yet, though.
I talked through most of it, so we're good.
Okay, fine. Anyway, sorry.
But maybe something to end on, kind of on in the same heart of the manuscript. My challenge to you listeners is, as you listen through this album, pick one lyric that as you go through really sticks with you, and then set aside some time and just kind of sit with it. Maybe journal, maybe write about it. The writing teacher in me wants you to write. It's good practice. It's good for you. But just kind of sit and ask yourself, why did this stick out to me? Why is this interesting? Why is it funny? I thought All My Friends Smell Like Weed Are Babies was really funny, but there is some reflection there of like the weirdness of being in my 30s. So that is my homework assignment to you. Try to just pick one line or 2 lines that seem to stick out to you and sit with it for a while and ask yourself, why does that stick out to you?
I think we're going to have to do that for ourselves, Zach. I think you just gave us homework that we're going to have to do.
That's technically what we just did for the last 2 hours, to be fair.
We did, but we can do more of it.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that's all we have for you. Thanks for listening.
You're still here after 2 hours.
Yeah, we appreciate you, and I'm gonna see if I can play some. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to tune in next time as we go off the deep end into another Taylor Swift song right here on AP Taylor Swift.